There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to truly live: to fight, to bleed, to earn your place among legends. I was born beneath the endless gray skies of Fenris, where the cold cuts bone deep and even the wind howls with hunger. My name no longer matters. The wolf priests burned it away long ago, but before I was chosen, I was just another hunter scraping out a life on the ice fields of Aesheim. On Fenris, childhood ends the moment you learn to kill. We were raiders and fishers, warriors and survivors. Each sunrise could be our last. The sea ice cracked without warning, swallowing whole villages. Frost, WIRMS, coiled beneath the tundra. And when the long night fell, we lit our fires and told stories of gods who walked as men, of Leman Russ, the Wolf King, who would one day return. But stories don't keep you alive out there. Steel and instinct do. I still remember the stink of seal fat and blood on my hands, the weight of a crude axe, the frostbitten ache in my fingers as I dragged a kill across the snow. Every step, you had to listen for the crunch of unseen paws behind you, the kraken's groan beneath the ice, the whisper of death on the wind. We were a hard people, born from hardship. And yet, for all our savagery, the Sky Warriors, the Allfather's angels, were something else entirely. They were myths given flesh, armored gods who sometimes descended from the heavens in fire and thunder to test us. When they came, clans knelt in awe, for to be chosen by them was to be marked by destiny or by doom. The day they came for me began like any other. The horizon burned crimson as the sun clawed its way above the ice cliffs. I was hunting with my father's old spear, stalking a frost stag through the fog. My breath turned to crystals. I remember thinking it would be a good kill, enough meat for a week. Then the sky screamed. A roar unlike anything I'd heard split the heavens. The clouds tore apart. A silver shape, vast, winged, and wreathed in flame, plunged through the storm. The ground shook as it struck down beyond the ridge. I ran toward it without thinking, drawn by awe and terror both. When I reached the crater, I saw them. Warriors in armor the color of winter steel. Wolf pelts draped over their shoulders, eyes glowing with cold fire. They stood taller than any man, each movement deliberate, each breath mechanical. A Thunderhawk gunship hissed behind them, its engines melting the snow into steam. One of them turned toward me. His voice came through a Vox grill, deep and ancient. Another hunter, unafraid. Step forward, boy. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but I didn't. I walked toward him, barefoot in the frost, the spear trembling in my hands. He studied me for a long moment, then tossed something at my feet, a thong, carved from black iron. You will come to the thong, if you survive the sea. Behind him, my people watched from afar. No one spoke. To refuse was death. To accept was worse. But pride burned hotter than fear that day. I took the thong and nodded. That night, I left my clan behind. No farewells, no promises, only the endless sea and the storm to cross. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay the thong, the mountain fortress of gods. I'd heard whispers that only 1 in 100 aspirants ever returned, and those who did were no longer human. As I lashed together a crude raft from whale bones and ice wood, the aurora flickered above, like the Allfather's eye watching. The tide was rising fast. I pushed off into the black water, waves breaking against my chest, the thong talisman cold in my grip. The current dragged me north, toward a darkness deeper than night. Wolves howled on the shore behind me, their cries swallowed by the wind. I didn't know if they mourned or welcomed me. They say Fenris breeds monsters, that the planet itself is a crucible. I think that's true. The sea that night was alive, whispering, testing me. Freezing rain bit into my flesh. Salt burned my eyes. I rode until my arms bled, until the stars blurred together, until my mind was nothing but a rhythm of pain and defiance. Somewhere, far in the distance, lightning cracked over the horizon. For a moment I saw it, the silhouette of the thong, rising from the storm like a wolf's thong piercing the sky. My fate awaited there, and whatever I was before that night, boy, hunter, son, would be lost beneath the ice forever. I remember thinking, if the gods want me dead, they'll have to fight me for it. The thong was no mere fortress. It was a mountain clawed from ice and stone, rising jagged and eternal from Fenris' frozen heart. As I approached in the Thunderhawk's cargo bay, the air thrummed with engines and the scent of ozone. Every movement of the warriors around me was precise, almost ritualistic, yet primal, a blend of machine and beast honed over millennia. They were the Space Wolves, the sons of Leman Russ, and to them, the universe was nothing but prey waiting to be tested. The hatch opened with a hiss, and I was slammed by the bitter wind of the high Fenrisian peak. Below, the frozen valleys stretched into shadowed infinity, and above, storm clouds clashed in violent silver. My bones ached, my lungs burned, but there was no time to linger on discomfort. One of the veteran warriors approached, broad, scarred, his armor inscribed with runes that pulsed faintly in the dying light. "Step forward, aspirant. Do not falter." I did. My hand still clutched the iron thong, knuckles white. My teeth chattered, though whether from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. Around me, other aspirants, boys and men alike, some barely recognizable as human, were being herded into the compound. All carried the same look of disbelief and determination. We had all heard the stories of the trials of the Fong, yet nothing could prepare anyone for the raw weight of reality. The sergeant leading us guided our group toward a frozen courtyard, where packs of Fenrisian wolves circled. Their eyes glowed amber in the dim light, their teeth glistening like jagged icicles. These were no tame beasts. Only the reckless or the dead strayed too close. They were sentinels, guardians, and teachers, and they would judge the strength of our hearts before the first trial even began. The aspirants were instructed to kneel, a gesture both of respect and submission. We listened as the sergeant's voice boomed over the courtyard, carried by the wind and the hiss of vox amplifiers. The Fong does not take the weak. It does not reward hesitation. Only those who embrace the predator within will survive. The Allfather sees all. He tests all. Do not fail. No one spoke. We were too aware that a single misstep could mean death. Silence was a weapon and a shield. My mind drifted briefly to my clan back home. The hunters who had raised me, their faces blurred by memory, replaced by the looming shadow of the Fong. We were all hunters now, but the prey was not the stag, nor the frost Wyrm, nor even our neighbors. The prey was the mountain itself, the trial, and ultimately, ourselves. Our first test was deceptively simple. We were to ascend the ice spire that jutted like a broken Fong from the courtyard floor, a climb that would test not only strength but focus, balance, and endurance. The veteran warriors circled, their eyes unblinking, noting every slip, every hesitation. Around us, the wind shrieked like 1,000 dying spirits, and ice shards ripped at our skin. I could feel my pulse in my throat, and yet I forced one hand in front of the other, following the rhythm of breathing that the sergeant had drilled into us before we ever reached Fenris. Halfway up, a sudden gale tore through the spire. One aspirant lost his footing, and the wolves leapt, teeth bared, though not to kill, but to remind him that weakness had consequences. He scrambled back, blood running from a gash on his forearm. His pride shattered as much as his skin. I felt a knot in my stomach, an understanding of what survival meant here. Each of us was being remade, like steel in a forge, under pressure, flame, and ice. By the time I reached the summit, my body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached. Frostbite gnawed at fingers and toes. Yet when I looked down, the courtyard stretched below like a battlefield frozen in time. The veterans, their fangs gleaming beneath their masks, nodded once, approvingly, as if acknowledging a victory that I had barely earned. I clenched my jaw, the Fong iron cold against my palm, and understood what it meant to step fully into the life of a space wolf. The second part of the trial came with the wolves themselves. Each aspirant was paired with a Fenrisian beast, not to fight, but to hunt as a pack. I was given a massive gray wolf, its eyes bright with cunning intelligence. My pulse raced as it circled me, sniffing, testing. To fail the bond was death. To succeed was survival. Slowly, cautiously, I matched its movements, reading its rhythm, mirroring its intent. Hours passed in that frozen dance, until finally, the wolf ceased circling and lowered its head in a gesture of grudging respect. My chest rose and fell in ragged relief. As night fell over the Fong, the Thunderhawk engines above roared once again, carrying the veterans back to the skies. The courtyard emptied, leaving us with only the biting wind and our newly earned companions. I huddled against the wolf, my body shaking not entirely from cold. I realized then that the savage life of a space wolf began with moments like these: fear, endurance, and the first tentative taste of triumph. I did not yet understand what awaited us in the deeper trials, the tests of combat, the rites of mutation, the horrors that lay beyond the mountain's shadows. But for now, I was alive. I had survived my first day under the shadow of the fawn. And in the cold, gray silence that followed, I felt a strange sense of belonging, not to Fenris, not to my past, but to the pack. The All-Father watches, they had said. I knew then that I had been seen, not as a boy, not as prey, but as something that might one day earn a place among gods and monsters alike. The wind howled around us, wolves' eyes glinting like dying stars. And somewhere deep in the night, I heard the faint echo of what I had always feared and desired: the call to hunt, the call to war, the call to the savage life. The tension builds. Subscribe to witness more tales from the Dark Millennium. The trials of the Fong were a crucible unlike anything I had imagined, designed not only to test the body but to strip the mind bare, exposing every flaw, every weakness. From the moment we were summoned to the inner sanctums of the fortress, a sense of inevitability clung to us like frostbite. The air smelled of iron, smoke, and something older, the lingering essence of warriors who had endured these halls before us. Here, failure was not just dishonor. It was death, plain and unyielding. Our first trial was endurance, a simple name for what was anything but simple. We were marched across the jagged ice terraces to the edge of a frozen chasm, the wind tearing at our capes and armor, voices lost in the gale. The sergeant, a giant of a man with scars that traced every battle he had fought, looked down upon us with eyes like twin icicles. Without a word, he unleashed a pack of Fenrisian wolves, each bred to hunt relentlessly, their teeth sharper than the axes we had trained with. The command was clear: survive, cross the chasm alive, bond with the beast, or perish. I felt the surge of primal fear as the wolves lunged, their massive jaws snapping just inches from my flesh. My heart slammed against my ribcage. But instinct, honed from years of hunting in the frozen wilds of Fenris, guided me. I matched their movements, anticipating, adapting, becoming one with the rhythm of predator and prey. My mind sharpened. My body moved with precision I did not know I possessed. The fear did not disappear. It transformed into something sharper, a tool to focus every sinew, every breath. Hours blurred into a continuous struggle. The wind cut through my cloak. The cold gnawed at exposed skin, and fatigue clawed at my muscles. Many aspirants faltered. I watched as one boy, barely older than a child, misstepped, plunging into the icy abyss below. A wolf howled, a chilling sound that seemed to pierce the soul itself. There was no mercy here, only survival. I gritted my teeth, forcing my legs to obey, pushing every ounce of strength into every movement. When finally I reached the far side of the chasm, lungs burning, fingers numb, the sergeant nodded. The first trial was survived, but it had claimed its toll. The next phase was combat. We were armed with only blades and shields, thrust into a sprawling arena carved from stone and ice. The objective was simple in concept: defeat the opponent. Simple, if it weren't for the fact that these were not mere men. My challengers moved with the lethal grace of wolves, their strikes precise, their defense impeccable. Blood stained the arena floor as one by one aspirants fell, either broken in body or spirit. The lesson was clear: skill alone was not enough. To be a space wolf, one needed cunning, ferocity, and the willingness to embrace the savagery within. I faced a boy from a distant clan, his armor dented, eyes wide with terror and resolve. We circled each other, blades raised, each strike and parry a conversation of death. He lunged, I sidestepped, countered, and for a moment, the world narrowed to steel and frost, to heartbeat and breath. Finally, I found an opening, disarming him with a swift motion honed by instinct and instinct alone. He fell to his knees, chest heaving, and I felt no triumph, only the cold, necessary reality that weakness was extinguished without hesitation here. Then came the most grueling trial, the psychological. We were herded into chambers where darkness reigned, where shadows whispered lies, fears, and futures that could have been. Here, the rune priests guided us. Speaking of the All-Father, of Lehman Russ, of battles won and lost across millennia, visions assaulted us, of death, of failure, of what we would become if the wolf within overtook the man. Many broke, screaming into the void, unable to reconcile the raw, primal hunger the Canis Helix invoked with the remnants of their humanity. I clenched the iron thong, whispered prayers to no one, and forced my mind to steel itself. Focus, endure, survive. By the time we emerged, the night had fallen. The aurora danced across the sky like the spirits of our ancestors, and I realized that the trials had already begun to change us. Faces once familiar now seemed foreign. Hands once steady now shook with newfound strength and fear. We were being remade, not as men, not as hunters, but as something in between, something that bore both the teeth of the wolf and the discipline of the warrior. As I lay against the ice, my new companion wolf curled beside me. I reflected on the cruel wisdom of the fawn. Every strike, every fall, every howl in the night was a lesson, and only those willing to embrace the savage life, to surrender and yet control the beast within, would endure. I understood then that survival was only the beginning. True life here meant accepting the transformation, the brutality, and the eternal vigilance required to walk the path of a space wolf. The blood of the wolf is not merely metaphorical. On Fenris, it courses through the veins of every aspirant, reshaping flesh and mind alike. When the rune priests led us into the sacred chambers beneath the fawn, the atmosphere was thick with incense, ozone, and the metallic tang of iron. Here, amidst the carvings of past heroes and beasts immortalized in stone, the aspirants were to undergo the Canis Helix ritual, a transformation, older than any recorded battle, a gift and a curse that blurred the line between man and monster. I stepped forward, hands trembling but heart steeled. The chamber was alive with faint hums and glyphs etched in obsidian, pulsing with energy older than Fenris itself. The rune priest's eyes glowed with a cold, piercing light as he traced symbols across my chest, chanting in a language that seemed to vibrate in my bones. The air thrummed, and I could feel something awakening within me, a wolf. Ancient, hungry, and eternal. The procedure was not pain-free. Acidic enzymes burned beneath the skin, reshaping muscles, altering bone, and forging reflexes that were preternatural. The serum injected through the fong vein seared, and my vision blurred as the world spun into a cacophony of color and sound. Yet, even in agony, I became aware of my own competence, how my mind, instinct sharpened by Fenrisian hunting, began to map my new body. Every movement was precise, every reaction instinctive. The wolf within tested me, yet I held it at bay, learning to control its hunger, its ferocity. Around me, others screamed. Some laughed, others clawed at their own flesh's mutations, twisted them in ways that the rune priests neither sanctioned nor foresaw. Eyes glowed, claws erupted from fingertips, fangs lengthened. Madness licked the edges of their minds. I gritted my teeth against the chaos within, whispering the sagas of Rust to myself. Focus, control, endure. Each mantra anchored me against the tide of the Canis Helix. Hours passed, or perhaps days. Time seemed irrelevant when every heartbeat felt like a hammer striking bone. My body convulsed as tendons tore and reformed, as reflexes rewired themselves. My senses sharpened until the scent of iron, the whisper of wind, the heartbeat of the wolf beside me were symphonies of survival. I caught glimpses of the past, memories of my clan, of hunts, of frost WIRMS leaping through the ice, all superimposed, over visions of battlefields in the void, of Thunderhawk gunships crashing through warp storms, of worlds ablaze under the Emperor's will. When the ritual ended, I was not the boy who had left Asaheim. My eyes were sharper, my reflexes deadly, my muscles coiled with unnatural strength. The Fong iron cold in my grip was no longer a talisman. It was a key, a symbol that I had survived the crucible of blood and ice. Yet the wolf lingered inside me, a constant presence, gnawing at restraint, whispering in dreams. I had passed the first true threshold, and it left a mark deeper than any scar. The knowledge that survival had required surrender, but only partial. The rune priest studied me in silence. You have survived. The wolf is yours. But the wolf demands obedience. Fail it, and it will consume you. I nodded, too aware of the truth in his words to speak. Around me, other aspirants were not as fortunate. Some had succumbed to the madness, others to the mutations that twisted their bodies grotesquely. The Allfather does not shield the weak. The Fang takes only what is worthy. And yet, even as I recognized the danger, a spark of pride ignited. I had endured, and in doing so, I had begun the journey to becoming one of the space wolves. Emerging from the chamber, I felt the chill of Fenris like never before. The wind no longer bit. It whispered secrets of the hunt, of battle, of glory earned and life forged in blood. The auroras painted the sky in violent greens and purples, flickering as though reflecting the wild, untamed life now coursing through me. Every step back to the courtyard was measured, controlled, yet filled with newfound power. I could sense every predator, every ally, every pulse of life in the ice around me. But the Canis Helix was not a gift without cost. Even as my body grew stronger, sharper, my mind wrestled with the beast within. Dreams became nights of teeth and claws, of hunting beyond reason, of hunger that could never be sated. Yet through the struggle, I discovered clarity, strength tempered by loyalty, instinct guided by honor, ferocity balanced by cunning. That balance would define my life as a space wolf. By the time I collapsed beside my wolf companion that night, exhaustion nearly claiming me, I understood the harsh truth Fenris instills in all who survive. To live is to fight. To survive is to transform. To endure is to accept that the line between man and monster is not a boundary, but a path, and I had begun walking it. The beast within is both gift and curse. After the Canis Helix, I was no longer merely human. My senses were keener, my reflexes lightning fast, my strength enough to wrest a wolf from its feet. Yet with every heartbeat, I felt the animal stirring inside me, coiling around my mind like a predator waiting to strike. Hunger, rage, and instinct whispered constantly. And for the first time, I understood the price of the Fang's favor. Survival demanded mastery over the monster within, or it would master me. Fenris is a world that never forgives weakness. Even within the Fang, the mountain fortress could be a death trap. Corridors twisted, like the tunnels of ice WYRMS, and shadows hung heavy as if alive. I learned quickly that vigilance was life. One misstep, one hesitation, could mean being crushed under falling stones, impaled by jagged ice, or hunted by a wolf whose loyalty had been broken. The Fang itself was a trial, demanding cunning and instinct in equal measure. Our instructors were merciless, veteran space wolves, their eyes cold and precise, observed every twitch, every tremor, every hesitation. They pushed us into combat exercises against beasts, mechanical drones, and even each other. I learned to anticipate the slightest movement, to read intent before it manifested. There was a moment, mid-exercise, when I disarmed a fellow aspirant in a single motion, not out of aggression, but efficiency. That skill, that lethal precision, was celebrated in silence, a competence recognized without words. And yet, even as I honed my body and reflexes, the Canis Helix began its more insidious work. The wolf whispered in dreams, urging me toward ferocity, dominance, and sometimes cruelty. I had nightmares of tearing through my own comrades, of succumbing to the predatory nature within. I fought these urges with rituals, prayers, and lessons from the rune priests. But each night, the struggle intensified. I felt myself changing, not in form alone, but in thought, in perspective. Humanity was a distant memory, a shadow blurred by fur, fangs, and Fang-driven instinct. The first true test came unexpectedly. We were dispatched on a hunt through the icy forests surrounding the Fang, a scenario designed to mimic real combat. The terrain was brutal, frozen rivers, jagged cliffs, and ambushes hidden beneath snowdrifts. Our quarry was not human. It was Fenrisian predators trained to test us. Wolves, ice serpents, and frost WYRMS lurked in the mist. The objective was survival, strategy, and mastery of the pack. I paired with my wolf companion, and together we tracked a massive frost WYRM. Its hide was nearly impervious to our weapons, and its eyes glowed with a predatory intelligence that mirrored my own beast within. The hunt became a dance, instinct against instinct, predator against predator. The WYRM lunged, teeth snapping inches from my face. I ducked, rolled, and slashed at its flank, my wolf lunging in tandem. Coordination and trust defined the moment. We emerged victorious, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. A lesson that instinct alone was insufficient without intelligence and cooperation. After the hunt, I lay on the snow, chest heaving, wolf curled beside me. Pain and exhilaration mingled, leaving my mind raw and alert. The wolf within prowled quietly, satisfied for the moment. But I knew this was only the beginning. Mastery would take years, perhaps decades, and yet I felt an undeniable thrill. The life of a space wolf was one of constant challenge, of eternal vigilance, and of embracing the savage within without losing oneself entirely. Later that night, we gathered in the great Hall of the Fawn. Rune priests chanted in the glow of braided fire, recounting the deeds of Leman Russ and the warriors who had come before. I felt the weight of history pressing down on me, the burden of carrying the legacy of a chapter older than most civilizations. And though I was still young, still learning, I understood that this life demanded sacrifice, not just of comfort or safety, but of the very essence of what made me human. The wolf within stirred again as the flames reflected in my eyes. It would be a constant companion, a predator and protector, a symbol of the path I had chosen. And I welcomed it, knowing that to deny it was to court death in the frozen wastes of Fenris. My journey was only beginning. The initiate's hunt was the first true measure of whether the lessons of the Fong had taken root or merely grazed the surface. It began before dawn, in a forest of jagged ice and petrified trees where the wind tore through the branches like the teeth of a predator. The sergeant, a veteran whose armor was scored by centuries of battle, watched us assemble with a gaze that could freeze the soul. Our quarry was simple in concept, yet deadly in execution. Fenrisian predators, bred and trained by the chapter, released to test our instincts, teamwork, and resolve. Survival meant more than skill. It meant embracing the savage within while maintaining the cunning and discipline of the pack. I adjusted my grip on the lost spike, feeling the cold metal against my frostbitten fingers. My wolf companion, sleek and massive, nuzzled against my side before darting into the shadows. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence and ferocity. We were a unit now, not just man and beast, but predator and predator, bound by the trials of the Fong and the blood of the Canis Helix. Around me, other aspirants and their wolves melted into the mist, shadows among shadows. Every step was a calculation. Every breath could betray us to the hunters waiting in the frozen depths. The hunt began with a sharp howl from the sergeant, a signal that echoed through the valley. Predators surged from hidden lairs, frost WIRMS slithering beneath ice, massive wolves moving with terrifying speed, and hybrid monstrosities, whose very presence screamed of the chapter's ancient experiments. Instinct surged, adrenaline pumping in rhythm with the wolf at my side. We moved as one, anticipating each other's maneuvers, countering attacks, and striking with brutal precision. One misstep, one hesitation, and the forest would claim us. I caught sight of a frost WIRM lunging from beneath a snowdrift, jaws snapping inches from my shoulder. Without thinking, I rolled, lost spike flashing in the dim light, striking the creature's exposed flank. My wolf leapt simultaneously, teeth finding a weak spot in its scaled hide. The coordination felt instinctual, as though we had hunted together for lifetimes rather than mere months. Around us, screams and howls blended with the wind, a symphony of death that tested every ounce of our focus. Hours passed, yet time felt suspended. The hunt pushed us to our limits, forcing us to adapt to threats that were never constant, never predictable. Another aspirant fell, caught by a frost WIRM in a devastating strike. The sergeant's voice rang out, commanding, guiding, and judging. Each action was scrutinized. Each mistake was a lesson, carved in pain and survival. By the time we reached the heart of the forest, only a handful of us remained, bloodied but alive. Our instincts sharpened and our bonds with our wolves cemented. Through it all, I noticed the change in myself. The Canis Helix had made me stronger, yes, but it had also awakened the predatory mind within. My thoughts were faster, my reactions almost preternatural. Yet alongside the beast, I maintained awareness, strategy, and foresight. I had become a hunter not just of Fenrisian predators, but of the chaos and threats that awaited beyond the fawn. The wolf within was no longer a whisper. It was a guide, a partner, and a reflection of the warrior I was becoming. By nightfall, we returned to the fawn, exhausted and bloodied, yet unbroken. The sergeant nodded at each of us. Acknowledgement of competence earned through pain, endurance, and instinct. Around the courtyard, wolves circled us, their amber eyes reflecting the aurora above, silent witnesses to our growth. For the first time, I felt an understanding of the pack's law, strength tempered by loyalty, ferocity balanced by discipline, and survival intertwined with unity. That night, as I tended my wounds and sat beside my wolf, I reflected on the path ahead. The Fong would demand more, deeper trials, harsher combat, and the unending struggle against the beast within. Yet I felt an exhilaration, a primal joy in knowing that I had survived the initiate's hunt, that the wolf and I were one, and that the savage life of a space wolf was no longer a distant story, but my reality. The Fong's shadow stretched over the land like a predator poised to strike, jagged and eternal against the storm-laden sky. Arrival at the fortress monastery was a revelation in scale and savagery. Towers of blackened stone and ice clawed at the heavens, runes carved into their surfaces glowing faintly with ancient power. Gargantuan banners emblazoned with wolf motifs flapped violently in the wind. From this perch, the entirety of Fenris' northern wilds seemed tiny, insignificant, yet teeming with threats I had only begun to comprehend. Here, in the heart of the chapter's power, every stone, every shadow, every breath carried centuries of war, sacrifice, and legend. The inner courtyards were a maze of frost-carved sculptures, training grounds, and armories. Space wolves moved among the aspirants with an effortless authority, their eyes cold, calculating, yet tempered by a primal ferocity. Each one carried the scars of centuries of combat, their armor decorated with trophies, fangs, and talismans that whispered of ancient battles. I felt both awe and fear. The Fong was alive, not merely a fortress, but a sentinel, a crucible, and a teacher all at once. Within the grand hall, the sergeant briefed us on the chapter's history, its traditions, and the responsibilities that awaited. Each tale was both inspiring and terrifying. How Leman Russ himself led the great hunt. How the space wolves repelled the thousand suns at Prospero. How entire worlds had fallen under the weight of their wrath. The words were heavy with truth, glory, and horror intertwined. The line between heroism and savagery blurred by necessity. I realized that to survive here, one could not merely be strong. One had to embrace the myth, the legacy, and the blood that bound the pack together. We were led through the armories, where weapons older than most human civilizations rested. Bolt pistols with runes etched in the bone of fallen beasts. Frost-imbued chains words, and relics from battles long past. I felt a thrill, not of mere possession, but of understanding the weight of these tools. They were not toys. They were instruments of survival, ritualized and perfected over centuries. The veteran beside me demonstrated the intricacies of the runic augments, explaining how every weapon's balance, weight, and resonance contributed to the hunter's effectiveness. It was competence porn at its finest, and I drank it in, knowing that mastery of these arms would be the difference between life and death. Outside, the training grounds extended across frozen terraces, each designed to test and temper the aspirants in ways that mirrored the savagery of Fenris itself. Combat simulations involved not just humans, but mechanical constructs, controlled predators, and environmental hazards that would have killed ordinary men. I watched a veteran strike down a massive automaton with a single precise swing. The motion fluid, calculated, terrifying. I took mental notes, embedding every detail into my instincts, for soon I would be called to emulate these feats, and failure was unacceptable. As the days passed, I began to understand the rhythm of life under the Fong's shadow. Dawn brought hunting, training, and the sharpening of skills. Dusk brought reflection, meditation, and communion with the wolf within. Yet even in routine, danger lurked. Avalanches could bury entire groups. Rogue beasts could strike with lethal cunning, and the cold could claim a man in moments. Survival here was not guaranteed, it was earned. Every day, Through endurance, intelligence, and ferocity, I found myself growing, physically, mentally, spiritually. The wolf within no longer whispered. It guided. My bond with my companion deepened. An unspoken understanding of movement, intent, and instinct. I began to feel the weight of the chapter's expectations, the legacy I was joining, and the cost of failure. And as I gazed out from the frozen ramparts, watching storms churn across the northern ice, I realized that the Fong was more than a fortress. It was a crucible where boys were remade into wolves, where mortals became predators, and where the savage life of a space wolf was etched into every bone, every sinew, and every heartbeat. The lessons of iron and fire were as relentless as Fenris itself. After surviving the initial trials and earning the wary respect of the veterans, we were paired with sergeants who would push us beyond endurance into true mastery. My mentor, a scarred veteran named Bjornulf, towered over me with a presence both terrifying and commanding. His armor bore the marks of 100 campaigns, and his eyes glimmered with the cold wisdom of centuries. From the moment he spoke, it was clear mistakes were punished, hesitation was fatal, and excellence was demanded. Training began at dawn, beneath the whistling wind that tore across the frozen terraces. Bjornulf demonstrated a series of complex maneuvers with the frost axe, every swing precise, every block calculated, every step deliberate. His competence was horrifying in its perfection. It was a dance of death, executed with deadly grace. When he turned to us, he demanded replication. One misstep, one off-balance strike, and he would halt the session, deliver a swift punishment, and make us start over. We learned boltercraft in the armories, the fine mechanics of assembling, maintaining, and wielding our weapons with surgical precision. Each rifle, each magazine, each bolt was a potential lifeline or death sentence. Bjornulf emphasized situational awareness, teaching us to read recoil patterns, calculate trajectories, and anticipate enemy maneuvers. Even in moments of routine, the lessons reinforced the harsh truth. Survival demanded both skill and instinct. Beyond the technical, we were drilled in the sagas of Russ and the histories of the chapter. Every story was a lesson, every victory a blueprint, every defeat a cautionary tale. One tale spoke of a lone wolf lord who held a critical choke point against a horde of chaos marauders, using not just strength but cunning, patience, and an unflinching will. Bjornulf would pause at the climax, pointing to us, saying, "You will do worse than survive, you will lead, or you will die." Each word burned into my mind, merging duty with instinct, myth with reality. Combat simulations intensified. We faced mock heretic insurgents, mechanical proxies, and environmental hazards designed to test reflexes under duress. The snowfields became battlefields, each frozen ridge and ice fissure a potential threat. My wolf and I moved as one, countering attacks with a lethal choreography that earned nods from the veterans. Every successful maneuver reinforced my growing confidence and control over the beast within. Yet, even amidst discipline and mastery, the Canis Helix reminded me of its presence. It surged during exertion, urging aggression, testing restraint. During a simulated ambush, I felt the wolf's instinct push me to strike without calculation, to overwhelm the target. With sheer ferocity, I clenched my teeth, forcing intellect over instinct, and emerged victorious not by savagery alone, but by controlled strategy. The lesson was clear: competence required balance. The beast could enhance, but not replace, the warrior's mind. By nightfall, as the aurora danced across the sky, I reflected on the transformation I was undergoing. I was no longer the boy who left Asaheim. I was shaping into a warrior capable of wielding both man and beast in harmony. Each lesson of iron and fire, every drill, every story, every calculated strike, reinforced a singular truth: to survive and thrive as a space wolf, mastery of body, weapon, mind, and beast was essential. The Fong demanded nothing less. And the Allfathers I watched unblinking, waiting to see who would rise and who would fall. The hunt unleashed was nothing like the trials we had faced within the Fong. Our first real deployment was to a heretic-infested world on the outer fringes of Fenris sector, a planet scarred by civil war, its cities reduced to ash, its forests blackened and poisoned by warp-tainted energy. Orders were simple: purge the heretics, secure the populace, and neutralize any chaos-aligned entities. Yet simplicity in the 41st millennium is an illusion. Chaos always lurks beyond expectation, and we were about to learn that terror comes in many forms. Our Thunderhawk gunship pierced the smoky sky, engines roaring as we descended toward the beleaguered city. The view from above was apocalyptic: collapsed towers, burning streets, and twisted figures fleeing or fighting in desperate defiance. The city was alive with danger. I could feel the tension radiating through the pack, my wolf companion growling softly, ears twitching to every disturbance. Every instinct screamed that this was no ordinary mission, that the warp itself had left its mark here. We touched down amidst rubble and ash, bolters already humming. The first strike was against the local militia, twisted by heretical doctrine, their eyes glowing with unnatural fire. Combat was immediate, brutal, and chaotic. The skills honed in the Fong, reflexes, coordination, precision, and the controlled ferocity of the Canis Helix became our lifeline. My wolf and I moved as one through narrow streets and shattered squares, dispatching foes with lethal efficiency. Each strike reinforced the balance between beast and warrior. Instincts guided, strategy controlled. Yet the city held secrets. Warp-tainted energy leached from cracked foundations, twisting creatures into grotesque forms. Shadows seemed alive, whispering lies. And even the veteran space wolves were cautious. I glimpsed a sorcerer manipulating the warp, his presence bending the air, warping light, and animating the dead. The reality of the warp struck with horrifying clarity. It was a force of pure malice, a sentient darkness that sought to devour mind and body alike. The aspirants, myself included, felt the weight of incomprehensible power, pressing against our sanity. We fought not just heretics, but the manifestations of corruption itself. Warp-spawned beasts that defied anatomy, shrieking horrors that moved too fast to track, and twisted psychers wielding the raw fury of the immaterium. The lessons of the Fong were invaluable. Without instinct, skill, and unity with our beasts, survival would have been impossible. My wolf leapt with lethal timing, teeth finding gaps in monstrous hides, while I struck with calculated precision, my law spike firing in controlled bursts. The synergy between man and wolf became the difference between life and death. As the battle escalated, losses mounted. Brothers fell, torn by creatures that seemed immune to conventional tactics. The smell of blood and ozone filled my senses, mixing with the bitter smoke of the burning city. Amid the chaos, I realized the stark truth. Heroism in the 41st millennium comes at a cost measured in flesh and spirit. The pack is bound not by comfort or camaraderie, but by shared survival, sacrifice, and the willingness to endure horrors that would break ordinary men. By the time the city was secured, night had fallen. Fires painted the sky crimson, casting grotesque shadows across ruins. We had survived, yet every victory felt hollow. The warp had left its scars, both visible and unseen. My wolf curled beside me, bloodied but alive, a mirror of my own exhaustion. I understood that the savage life of a space wolf was not about glory. It was about enduring the impossible, facing the inhuman, and emerging intact while the world around you burned. The aftermath of the hunt was a silence heavy enough to suffocate. The fires of the city burned low, casting flickering shadows across the ruined streets. Corpses, human and inhuman alike, lay strewn in disarray, a grim testament to the ferocity of the battle. I moved among the survivors and the fallen, my senses heightened by the Canis Helix. Every sound, smell, and movement amplified. The wolf at my side was tense, ears twitching, eyes scanning. Even in victory, danger lingered. Fenris had taught me that survival was never guaranteed, and the warp never slept. Veterans began the grim work of cataloging casualties and cleansing the city of lingering heretical influences. I assisted where I could, noting both the discipline and efficiency of these seasoned warriors. Each movement was precise, each decision calculated. It was competence porn at its most brutal. Their ability to maintain composure amid death, to execute necessary tasks with lethal efficiency, was terrifying and inspiring. I absorbed every detail, storing knowledge for when I would be called upon to lead or act independently. The survivors were terrified, many whispering of demons and curses. Some had witnessed the warp manifesting in forms too horrifying to comprehend. The reality of our universe was no longer theoretical. It was immediate, tangible, and lethal. I felt the weight of responsibility pressing against my shoulders. As a space wolf, and one in training, my role extended beyond combat. Protection, guidance, and judgment. Fenris had prepared me for the hunt. But the lessons of mercy, leadership, and strategy were being forged here in blood and ash. Night descended fully, bringing a bitter wind that gnawed at exposed skin. My wolf companion settled at my side, muscles coiled but calm, and I felt the bond deepen in the quiet aftermath. The beast within, always present, now seemed less a predator and more an extension of myself, a companion, a guide, a reminder of the path I had chosen. The training of the Fong had prepared me for the physical, but the hunt had revealed the mental and spiritual demands of being a space wolf. Survival alone was insufficient. One must master body, mind, and beast. Yet even in the quiet, threats lingered. Warp-tainted echoes remained, subtle and insidious. Some buildings emitted faint psychic distortions. Shadows shifted unnaturally. The city, though ostensibly secured, still breathed with malevolence. Bjornulf warned us that the warp never truly leaves. It waits, preys on weakness, and strikes when vigilance falters. The lesson was clear. Triumph was temporary, and complacency could be fatal. Around the campfires that night, we shared stories, laughter, and silence in measured doses. I observed the veterans' interactions, noting the mix of stern authority and muted camaraderie. Bonds were forged not in comfort, but in shared hardship and mutual survival. My respect for them deepened, as did my understanding of what it meant to truly belong to a pack. The savage life demanded sacrifice, loyalty, and constant adaptation. Yet it also offered a strange solace, the certainty of shared purpose. Even amid chaos, before sleep claimed me, I reflected on the lessons of the day, instinct honed by the Canis Helix, discipline forged in combat, and awareness tempered by experience. My wolf lay beside me, breathing in rhythm with my own. The world was harsh, unyielding, and corrupt. But within the bond of the pack, within the crucible of the Fong and the trials of Fenris, I had found both strength and belonging. The savage life of a space wolf was not for the faint of heart, but it was mine, and I would endure. The lessons of leadership came swiftly and without mercy. Surviving the hunt was not enough to secure one's place among the space wolves. The Fong demanded more. The sergeants assessed us not only for skill and instinct, but for the ability to command, coordinate, and inspire, traits essential to a warrior in the 41st millennium. Bjornulf called me forward, his gaze like ice, piercing into the depths of my being. A pack does not survive on strength alone. It survives on unity. Lead or falter. We were assigned command of small units for a series of strategic drills. These exercises simulated real-world scenarios, clearing warp-tainted ruins, coordinating assaults against insurgents, and defending strategic points under extreme environmental stress. Each task was designed to push our decision-making to the edge, testing intuition, foresight, and leadership under duress. My heart raced with anticipation. Failure meant not only personal shame, but jeopardizing the survival of those under my command. The first scenario unfolded in a frozen industrial complex, its machinery long dead and rusting, yet still offering treacherous hazards. I issued orders with a clarity I had not possessed before, guiding my squad of aspirants and their wolf companions through ambush points, chokeholds, and improvised barricades. Every command required precision. A misstep could trigger cascading failure, and the simulated enemy, guided by veterans, was ruthless in its exploitation of mistakes. Midway through the exercise, the situation escalated. A simulated warp rupture unleashed spectral entities, forcing us to adapt instantly. Reflexes alone were insufficient. Strategy and cohesion dictated survival. I coordinated attacks, positioning wolves to flank, using terrain to our advantage, and ensuring no aspirant was left exposed. Each maneuver drew on lessons from the Fong, from the hunt, and from the Canis Helix. Instinct guided, intellect commanded. The squad moved like a single organism, each member anticipating the other. each strike calculated and lethal. Bjornulf observed from above, arms crossed, his eyes scrutinizing every decision. Occasionally, he interjected, redirecting my approach, testing flexibility and resilience. Predict your enemy, he barked. Control the battlefield, or it controls you. The weight of responsibility was palpable. My mind raced, calculating probabilities, anticipating movements, and balancing aggression with caution. The wolf beside me mirrored my intent, leaping at threats and providing both offense and intuition in a seamless partnership. By the conclusion, our unit had succeeded, the simulated city cleared, casualties minimized, objectives achieved. The sergeant nodded, and I felt a surge of pride tempered by awareness. Leadership was not about dominance. It was about precision, insight, and empathy. The wolf within, once a force of raw instinct, now complemented my strategic mind, guiding both action and decision. That night, as we rested beneath the aurora-lit sky, I reflected on the lesson: survival was necessary. But leadership defined the difference between a hunter and a predator, a soldier and a space wolf. The Fang demanded mastery of self, mastery of the beast within, and mastery of those who follow you into the heart of chaos. Only those who could balance instinct, intellect, and authority would endure the savage life. The call of the great hunt came like a thunderclap across Fenris, shaking the snow-laden forests and jagged peaks with anticipation. This was no training exercise, no simulation. It was a true test of every lesson we had learned. A battle against predators both natural and supernatural. The All-Fathers I seemed to pierce through the sky, watching us as we prepared. My wolf companion sniffed the wind, muscles coiled, ears alert, a reflection of the predator within me. The hunt was vast. Packs of space wolves, each led by veterans, were deployed across miles of frozen wilderness to track and eliminate a rogue warband of chaos-corrupted beasts. These creatures were not mere animals. They were amalgamations of Fenrisian predators twisted by warp energies, their very presence radiating malevolent intelligence. The terrain itself was a weapon: ice slicks, sudden crevices, snow-laden cliffs, and howling storms that could conceal or betray at a moment's notice. Survival depended on precision, instinct, and an unbreakable bond with one's wolf. I led a small unit, carefully navigating the treacherous paths. Every step required calculation. Ice underfoot could give way in an instant. Avalanches loomed, and the corrupted creatures were aware, adapting with intelligence almost human in quality. My wolf and I moved as one, senses attuned to every vibration, every whisper of movement. The pack's cohesion was tested immediately when one of our members triggered an ambush. Snarls, growls, and bolter fire erupted simultaneously. Instinct, training, and leadership coalesced in the moment, each of us compensating for the other's weaknesses, ensuring survival. We encountered the first of the warp-twisted predators, a frost WIRM with hide hardened beyond conventional weaponry. Its eyes glowed with unnatural light, teeth long and jagged, breath like a windstorm of frozen death. Strategy became paramount. I positioned my unit around natural cover, coordinated the wolves to flank, and waited for the perfect opening. The WIRM struck, and I countered with a swift, precise strike of my frost axe, while my wolf leapt to disrupt its momentum. The battle was a blur of ice, teeth, steel, and instinct, a perfect illustration of competence honed under the Fang. Hours stretched into a relentless chase. Each predator we faced brought new challenges: warped intelligence, supernatural strength, and the eerie, almost sentient cunning that only chaos could bestow. I felt the wolf within me surge, urging aggression, demanding dominance. But discipline held it at bay, guiding its power, channeling ferocity into calculated action. Each kill, each maneuver, each decision reinforced the symbiosis of man and beast, the hallmark of the savage life of a space wolf. Night fell, and the aurora painted the sky in violent ribbons of green and purple. The hunt concluded, but the lessons were indelible. Victory was never certain, and the price of misjudgment was immediate and absolute. The surviving wolves and aspirants gathered around the campfires, breathing heavily, bodies scarred, yet spirits hardened. I realized that the hunt was more than a trial. It was a baptism in blood and instinct, A proving ground where the beast within became a tool, not a master, and where the essence of the space wolf was forged anew. The echoes of the warp were subtle at first, a whisper beneath the howl of Fenrisian winds, a flicker at the corner of the eye. Yet in the aftermath of the Great Hunt, they became undeniable. Reports from the outer settlements hinted at chaos cult activity, rogue psychers, and warp-tainted beasts drifting from the frozen forests into human outposts. The Fong responded immediately, every space wolf, veteran and aspirant alike, mobilized for reconnaissance and intervention. I felt the familiar surge of the Canis Helix, sharpening instincts, heightening awareness, and yet whispering caution. Survival required balance, and here the stakes were higher than ever. Our squad was deployed to a village at the edge of a snow-laden fjord, its inhabitants terrified and mistrustful. Buildings were partially destroyed, signs of struggle etched into every wall, blood staining the snow. I led my wolf through the wreckage, ears attuned to the faintest sounds of life or predator. Every movement, every decision was critical. One misstep could alert hidden enemies or leave innocents exposed. The lessons of the Fong and the hunt guided me, shaping every instinct into precision, every reaction into strategy. The first encounter was sudden. A group of warp-tainted wolves emerged from the shadows, their forms distorted, their eyes glowing unnaturally. The clash was brutal. Instincts surged, teeth and claws flew, bolters barked in rhythm with battle cries. My wolf moved in perfect synchrony, disrupting enemy attacks, while I struck with calculated ferocity. Other squad members followed suit, demonstrating competence honed through countless drills. Coordination, skill, and the controlled savagery of the Canis Helix proved decisive. The warp-tainted wolves fell, leaving behind only frost-stained silence. As we pressed further into the village, the warp's influence became more pronounced. Doors twisted unnaturally, shadows shifted with intention, and the air seemed to vibrate with psychic resonance. A lone psyker emerged, eyes glowing with dark energy, chanting in a language older than Fenris itself. Reflex alone was insufficient. We had to combine strategy, coordinated fire, and instinctive precision. My wolf leapt, knocking the psyker off balance, while I struck decisively, severing the source of the warp corruption. The battle was brief but lethal, a testament to our training and unity. The village, though scarred, was secured. Survivors were tended to, and wards were placed to contain residual warp energies. The weight of responsibility was palpable. Mistakes would have had catastrophic consequences. I felt the pack's bond tighten, a mutual acknowledgement of survival and competence. The wolf beside me, bloodied but alert, reminded me that the savage life was not merely about physical prowess. It was about awareness, adaptability, and unity in the face of the universe's darkest threats. Night fell once more, auroras painting the sky with ghostly green and violet hues. I sat beside my wolf, reflecting on the day's events. The echoes of the warp were a reminder that vigilance was eternal, that the universe was merciless, and that mastery over body, mind, and beast was essential. The Fong had prepared me for the physical, the hunt for the tactical, and this mission for the mental and spiritual, all converging into a single truth. The life of a space wolf is a savage, relentless, and unforgiving path. The siege of Frosthold was unlike any challenge I had faced before. Reports of a chaos uprising had reached the Fong weeks prior, and intelligence indicated that a combined force of heretics, warp-spawned beasts, and rogue psychers had entrenched themselves in the ruined fortress city. Space wolves from multiple packs converged, forming a strike force designed to purge the corruption and reclaim the stronghold. The mission was not merely combat, it was strategy, endurance, and control over the wolf within, all tested simultaneously. Our approach was harrowing. Snow-laden cliffs funneled us toward narrow passes while winds howled like the wails of the damned. Bjornulf, leading our contingent, moved with uncanny precision, reading the terrain and anticipating ambush points. Every footfall was calculated, every command deliberate. I felt my senses expand, the Canis Helix sharpening reflexes to a terrifying clarity. My wolf companion prowled beside me, a silent partner, mirroring my movements and instincts. Ready to strike the instant danger emerged. The first wave of resistance struck as we entered the lower courtyards. Warp-tainted cultists emerged from collapsed buildings, chanting in unison while shadows writhed unnaturally. The clash was immediate and brutal. Bolter fire tore through the frozen air. Axes bit into corrupted flesh, and wolves lunged at enemies with lethal precision. The coordination between humans and beasts was seamless, the controlled savagery of the Canis Helix evident in every movement.